On a storm-soaked night, a man discovers a sealed wooden box left at his door, wrapped in black rope, covered in ancient talismans, and marked with his own name. What begins as curiosity quickly turns into a nightmare when something inside starts knocking and calling out in the voices of those he loves. As a dark secret tied to his bloodline unfolds, he realizes too late that some things are never meant to be opened. If you love psychological horror, cursed objects, and deeply unsettling supernatural stories, this chilling tale will haunt you long after it ends. I once thought the most terrifying thing in this world was death. I used to believe that only the faint-hearted feared ghosts and demons. That only superstitious people bowed their heads before a few faded yellow talismans or half-finished stories passed from mouth to mouth. I was the kind of person who always needed a rational explanation for every phenomenon. Physical evidence for every fear. A clear cause for every sound that rose in the middle of the night. But all of that was true only until the night I carried the sealed wooden box into my apartment. After that night, I no longer believed in what eyes could see and ears could hear. Because there are things that, once touched, turn reason into nothing more than a rotten plank drifting on a black sea. While a human being becomes like a door pried slightly open from the inside, only waiting for darkness to pour out. The box came to me on a rain-soaked night, heavy with the smell of damp rot. That kind of unseasonal rain that dragged the whole city into a strange sadness. That day I got off work very late. The road leading back to the old apartment block where I lived was almost completely deserted. Streetlights glowed dimly through the curtain of rain, and the puddles underfoot reflected the gray buildings in warped shapes, like colossal tombs standing upright. I remember very clearly that it was nearly midnight, because when the car stopped at the gate, my phone showed 11:47 p.m. Wind swept through the corridor, carrying the smell of old wall paint mixed with dirty water from the overflowing drain. Foul and freezing, all I had been thinking about was a hot shower and sleep. Until I stepped out of the elevator on the 5th floor and saw it. It lay in front of my apartment door as if it had always belonged there. A long, old wooden box, dark brown to black, as though it had been soaked in mud for decades. Its surface was covered with dry white cracks, scratches running in every direction, and several glossy black stains that looked like oil, or something thicker. The box had been wrapped tightly in worn black rope, and every knot was covered with yellowed paper charms. The red ink faded into a dark brown like old blood. On the lid, right in the center, was my name, not written with a pen, not painted. It had been carved deep into the wood with something red hot and sharp. Each crooked letter burned into the grain, charred at the edges, looking as though my name had been engraved there with the hatred of someone who had sat in the dark for hours doing it. I stood frozen for a long time. The hallway was silent, no footsteps, no doors opening, no televisions murmuring from neighboring apartments the way they always did at night. Only the rain hammering the glass window at the end of the corridor and my heart beginning to pound. Heavy and dull. Inside my chest, I bent down for a closer look, still thinking maybe this was some grotesque joke. But at that moment, a sound came from inside the box. Knock. I jerked upright. Then it came again. Knock, knock. A light, hollow, dry knocking. like knuckles of bone tapping from within against the wood. Beat by beat, it grew colder and colder in my ears. I felt every hair on the back of my neck rise. My first instinct was to step back. My second was to tell myself this had to be a hallucination from exhaustion. But then the knocking came again. Clearer this time, enough to tear apart every weak excuse my mind tried to build. I remember glancing down the corridor, hoping to see someone hiding somewhere, ready to jump out laughing. But there was no one. Every apartment door was shut tight, the peepholes dark like blind eyes. I took out my phone to record it, but the screen suddenly went black even though the battery was still over 50%. When I pressed the power button, all it reflected was my own pale face and the shape of the box at my feet. A coldness crawled from my ankles up to the back of my neck. I should have run. I should have called security. I should have gone back downstairs and waited until morning. But my name was on that box. And in that moment a very strange feeling slipped into my thoughts. A feeling as though it had come an immense distance just to find the exact person it was meant to reach. If I left it out there, something worse would happen, not to it, to me. I crouched down and placed my hand on the lid. Cold. Not the ordinary cold of rain-soaked wood, but a deep cold, like touching the surface of stone inside a morgue. The instant my skin touched it, the knocking stopped. The corridor sank into a total silence, so dreadful that I could hear drops of water falling from the hem of my clothes. And even the shudder of the elevator moving somewhere far below on the ground floor. And inside that silence, I felt something in the box listening back to me. I wish I had run then. But I did not. I carried the box inside. My apartment was not large. Just a small living room connected to a kitchen, one bedroom, and a narrow balcony overlooking the row of buildings behind. I set the box in the middle of the living room under the pale yellow ceiling light. Then locked the door. Rainwater still dripped from the wood onto the floor, leaving thin black streaks. I intended to wipe it dry. But when I bent down, the smell rising from the box made me turn away at once. It was the smell of rotting wood mixed with old medicinal herbs. Of damp earth freshly dug from somewhere sunlight had not touched for years. And beneath all that was a sickening metallic stench, like rust steeped in blood. I straightened up and told myself I would call someone in the morning. Maybe security, maybe the police, maybe I would just throw it away. But somehow I did none of those things right away. I pulled out a chair, sat facing the box, and stared at the charms sealing it, with the feeling that I was looking at some bound animal lying asleep, and that if anyone touched the wrong place it would open its eyes. Close to 1 in the morning, while I was forcing myself to read work emails just to ignore its presence, the knocking returned. This time it was no longer 3 isolated taps. Knock, 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 knock. Steady, patient, like someone inside was testing how long I would endure it. I looked up. The box lay still, but the rope wound around it trembled slightly. A tiny movement as if caught by a draft. The problem was that every window in my apartment was shut tight. Then I heard the voice. Open it. The coffee cup in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. The voice was very small, broken, as though filtered through many thick layers of wood and a cramped space. But it had the tone of a human being. I jumped to my feet and backed away until I was against the sink. My mind clung to only one impossible thought. There was a person inside that box. "Please," the voice came again. Weaker, hoarse, as if the throat it came from had been scraped dry by calling for help too long. "I can't breathe." I do not remember when I had moved closer again. Maybe it was shock, maybe panic, maybe because no matter how afraid we are, human beings still have the instinct to save someone begging for help. I knelt down and pressed my ear close to the lid. From inside came the sound of hurried breathing, shallow and exhausted, and then fingernails scraping at the wood. "Is someone in there?" I asked, my voice rough. "Who locked you in here?" No answer at first, only breathing, then a whisper, very faint. "Don't let it find me. Hurry, open it." "How could you even be in there?" "Please." My hands shook as I stared at the rope and the layers of charms. I reached out toward the nearest knot, but the voice inside suddenly changed. It was no longer weak, no longer pleading. It dropped lower, slower, and sounded right beside my ear, as if it were no longer coming from inside the box at all, but from directly behind my neck. "That's right. Untie it." I jerked back so violently I fell onto the floor. The breathing inside vanished. The scratching vanished. All that remained was a faint laugh, like steam hissing through rotten teeth. I stood frozen. A very long time passed before I had enough control to back away from the box. I turned on every light in the apartment. The bedroom light, the kitchen light, the bathroom light. The brightness was thick, but the apartment did not feel any less dark, on the contrary. I had the sense that the shadowed corners had only deepened, as though the darkness had not dissolved but had merely been driven into the cracks. Compressed there, waiting for a chance to swell outward. I called Min, the only close friend I still kept in touch with from university. Min had studied archaeology before moving into research on folklore, digging through old oral variants, ancient rites, and all the things I had always dismissed as useless. I had never needed his knowledge until that night. The first call did not go through. The second did not either. On the third, Min answered with the irritable voice of someone pulled out of sleep. But all of that irritation disappeared the moment I sent him a picture of the box. Min fell silent for a long time. "Don't touch the seal," he finally said, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "You brought it into your house?" "Yes. Why? What's wrong?" Silence again on the other end. I could hear Min inhale very slowly. "The problem is, you may have brought in whatever was sealed inside along with it." I tried to laugh it off, even though the cold inside my stomach was growing heavier. "Stop joking. It's making human sounds. There could be someone. No living person could survive in that." Min cut me off. "Look at the size of the box. Those papers aren't for sealing an object. They're talismans for binding evil. A very old kind. Did you see the red ink on them? If I'm right, that isn't ordinary ink." I turned to look at the box. The charms clung all along the black rope, and on some of them the paper edges had curled back, revealing coarse yellow-gray fibers like sun-dried dead skin. "Do you know what it is?" I asked. Min lowered his voice even more. "I once read a handwritten account of a burial rite for something called the door borrower. It has no fixed form. It enters houses through invitation, through curiosity, through the living opening a way for it by their own hands. It doesn't break a seal by force. It makes someone else do it. A chill ran through me. That sounds like a ghost story. It is a ghost story, Min replied, but there was no trace of humor in him. Listen carefully. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, do not loosen a single rope. Do not peel off a single charm. I'll come in the morning. You can't come now? Storm's too bad. The road to your side is flooded. I can't. I wanted to curse. I wanted to tell Min not to talk as if any of this were real. But before I could reply, he added something that made my hands go numb. And one more thing, if it already knows your name, then it did not come to the wrong place. The call ended. I did not sleep. I dragged a chair a few meters away from the box and sat there holding a fruit knife like an idiot clinging to a small piece of metal in the middle of the night. The rain outside rose and fell. Sometimes thunder rolled through the building and made the window glass tremble faintly. The clock on the wall crept forward inch by inch, the second hand brushing through the silence like a claw scratching enamel. At 2:13 in the morning, every light in the apartment flickered at once, and the box began to shake. Not violently, but enough for me to see it shift slightly across the floor. The rope tightened and loosened as though something inside were slowly turning over. The charms pasted over the knots fluttered madly even though there was no wind. Then the voice came again, and this time it was completely different. No more pleading human voice. No more pretending. It spoke with a wet, gravelly sound, thick and sticky, like mud being forced through a ruined throat. So, you listened to your friend? I went cold. Why? It asked gently, almost conversationally. Aren't you curious? They shut me in the dark for a very long time. A very, very long time. I only need you to undo one knot. I gripped the knife harder, though I had no idea why. What do you want? I asked through clenched teeth. A quiet laugh came from the box. To get out. And what for? If I said to thank you, would you believe me? It knocked 3 times from inside, slow and measured, as though patiently instructing a child. You're the kind of person who can't stand not knowing what's behind a door. You've been like that since you were little. I froze. What do you know about me? I know that when you were 11, you crawled under your bed looking for the sound of crying that no one else could hear. I know you opened the locked room in your grandmother's house with your own hands. I know that when your mother was dying, you leaned close to her ear just to hear whether the dead really whispered your name one last time. Cold sweat ran down my back. No one knew all of that. No one. Shut up. Your greatest fear isn't ghosts. The voice whispered, clinging to every word. It's the idea that strange things will happen in this world and you'll never know why. The box trembled again. So open it. I'll tell you. I spent the rest of the night in a state between waking and sleeping. Sometimes it went completely silent, as if it were asleep. Sometimes I heard whispering right beside my ear even though the box still lay in the middle of the room. Once or twice I thought I saw something long and black like an arm slowly withdrawing from the edge of the kitchen cabinet. Near dawn, I must have dozed off in the chair. When I jerked awake, my neck hurt from sleeping twisted at an angle. And the first thing I saw was that one of the charms had fallen from the rope. It had not come loose by itself. Its edge had been torn. The inner side of the charm was smeared with black slime like mud. On the floor, beside the box, there was a small handprint made of the same black muck. 5 fingers, unnaturally long, each ending in a sharp claw, like the hand of a child stretched grotesquely over many years underground. I did not touch it. I took a photo and sent it to Min, and he called me almost immediately. "Don't stay alone with it," Min said. "I'm on my way." "I thought you couldn't come?" "The road's open now. Listen, after I got your picture I went digging through old materials. There was a similar sealing rite recorded in a mountain village in the north. They didn't seal a human corpse in the box. They sealed what had clung to the corpse. Something that did not die with its host. Did not rot with flesh and blood. It only sleeps when sealed with the name of the next keeper." The name of the next keeper? That means every time the seal is renewed, the box has to bear the name of the next person responsible for keeping it. If your name is on the lid, someone chose you. Something deep and cold opened under my feet. Since childhood, my family had spoken very little about relatives on my father's side. My grandfather died early, and my father rarely spoke about his old hometown. After my mother died, he returned there even less. I had always thought it was just a matter of a scattered family. But now, seeing those old names on Min's screen, I suddenly felt as if something dark had passed through many generations. Silently following bloodline like a scent only it could recognize. We decided to leave in the afternoon. Before nightfall, Min said the box must not be moved at night. I asked why. He only replied, "Because at night it's more awake." We wrapped the box in an extra layer of tarp, tied it with fresh rope, and had the apartment building security guard help us carry it down to a small truck Min had rented in a rush. During all of that, the box remained unnaturally silent. But that silence was more frightening than noise, because it felt less like submission than the stillness of an animal that has stopped struggling, not because it is restrained, but because it knows the road ahead will favor it. The road to the old shrine lay deep in an abandoned hill region. The rain lessened as we left the city, but the sky remained leaden, hanging low over the roadside woods. I drove. Min sat beside me. The box lay in the back beneath the tarp. Yet no matter how tightly we covered it, I could still feel its presence. Sometimes the rearview mirror caught a corner of the tarp lifting slightly, as if something beneath it had shifted. Sometimes I heard dull knocking from the cargo bed, steady and slow, like someone patiently counting miles. Min sat in silence, gripping the small bronze bell in his lap, lips pressed tight. Only when evening began to darken did he speak in a low voice. "If it speaks, don't answer. Absolutely don't." I had no time to ask more, because from beneath the tarp came the voice. "It knows where you're taking me." I nearly jerked the wheel. The voice was not loud, but it was perfectly clear. Right behind my seat, Min shut his eyes and murmured something under his breath. The bronze bell in his hand trembled faintly. "It's taking you back to where all of this began." The voice continued. "Do you want to know what your family did?" My fingers clenched so hard around the steering wheel that my knuckles hurt. "Don't listen," Min said through his teeth. "Your grandfather knew." The thing in the box laughed softly. "Your father knew. Your whole family knew. Only you didn't." I said nothing, but my mind was already unraveling. Min pulled a talisman from his pocket, turned, and flung it at the box. Instantly the laughter twisted into an angry hiss, and the truck bed slammed hard enough to make the rear glass rattle. A foul, bloody stench flooded the cab, as if something had just exhaled directly behind my neck. I pressed the accelerator harder, wanting only to reach the place as fast as possible. The shrine we found stood at the end of a narrow path swallowed by weeds and vines. It was no longer whole. Only a cracked stone foundation remained, a few rotten wooden posts leaning out of place, and a roof half collapsed. Behind it stood an enormous banyan tree, its hanging roots draping down like countless strands of black hair. The ground there was soft and sunken, thick with the smell of mud, mingled with a slow, underlying stench of decay, like somewhere nearby a corpse had once been buried in haste. Night had just fallen when we arrived. Min cursed under his breath, saying we were later than planned, but turning back was no longer an option. The road behind us had already started filling with mist. We carried the box inside onto the shrine's stone floor. The moment we set it down in the middle of the cracked slabs, I felt the air there change completely. No more insect sounds, no more wind through the grass. The woods around us went silent, as though holding their breath. Min unpacked candles, charms, salt, and a handwritten notebook. He told me to stand outside the circle he drew and not step into it unless he called me. I nodded, though by then my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him. The ritual began after full dark. Min set 8 candles in a ring around the box, poured salt to connect them into a circle, and placed the bronze bell in front of the lid. He began reciting old lines I could not understand, his voice growing faster and faster. At first nothing happened, but when the 30th or 40th line ended, the box suddenly made a loud thud, as if something inside had slammed its shoulder against the wood. One candle went out, then a second. The flames were not blown out by wind. It was as if an invisible hand had pinched them dead. Min kept chanting, though his voice had begun to shake. From the box came laughter, and this time it no longer sounded remotely human. It was layered, as though many mouths were speaking through swamp water at once. Too late, too late. The ropes wrapped around the box tightened on their own, the charms trembling violently. One tore free, spun upward into the air, and blackened into ash before it touched the ground. Min went pale. He flipped rapidly through the notebook and read louder. The mud beneath the shrine floor began to bubble around the ring of salt, as though countless pockets of gas were rising from below. Then the hand appeared. A black hand, impossibly long and thin as a dead branch, pushed up through the mud outside the candle ring. Then a second, then a third. They were not attached to full bodies, only forearms and hands, clawing their way up out of the earth like worms. Their fingers groped and scraped over the stone, leaving deep grooves. I stepped back, almost falling. From the banyan roots came whispering in hundreds of voices, so low it might have been wind, except that it carried the unmistakable pain of the dead. Min shouted, "It's calling the things it has touched before." I stood frozen. A head slowly rose from a patch of mud behind the banyan tree. It had no face, just a gray, wrinkled mass of skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, smooth and featureless like melted wax. Then another, and another. More twisted figures appeared among the roots, all warped, faceless, necks crooked, limbs contracted like corpses left too long underwater. They did not walk on legs. They jerked forward in stiff spasms, heads cocked to one side as if sniffing our scent. At the same time, the lid of the box sprang open. Not fully, only a gap the width of 2 fingers. But what poured from that gap was not air. It was darkness, dense and black enough to swallow the nearest candlelight hole. A horrifying stench rose up. The smell of a crypt sealed for centuries, of damp hair, soaked bone, and flesh dissolved into thick liquid. Min screamed at me to grab the talisman from his pocket and stick it over the opening. I lunged forward in blind panic. But the moment I got close, something slid out through the crack. A finger. It was long and skeletal, with no complete skin over it, as if wrapped instead in strands of wet black hair. Its nail was yellow-brown, curved and sharp. The finger did not grab me right away. It slowly crooked in the air, beckoning, and then a voice spoke. In my father's voice. Son. My whole body locked. Son, save me. I knew my father was alive. I knew it could not be him. But hearing that exact voice, the familiar way it shaped each word, painfully true down to the smallest detail, shattered my reason in an instant. I remembered the final days when my mother was in the hospital. My father sitting all night in the corridor with bloodshot eyes. I remembered his face growing harder and older after the funeral. I remembered how he always avoided speaking of our old hometown, avoided speaking of my grandfather, avoided every question about relatives. It all came rushing back at once. And for one terrible instant I almost believed there really was some piece of my father trapped inside that box. Son, the voice gasped. It's kept me here for so long. I reached out, trembling. Min slammed the bronze bell. Its sharp, piercing sound tore through the night. I jerked back to myself just as the finger brushed the back of my hand. The place it touched burned as if I had plunged it into live coals. I cried out and stumbled away. A thin black line appeared beneath my skin, like ink seeping into my veins. Don't listen to any voice. Min shouted. It only borrows them. The faceless bodies around the shrine began crawling faster, sliding through the mud like carcasses dragged by scent. They surged toward the candle circle like a pack of corpses drawn to blood. Min threw me a stack of charms and told me to slap one onto anything that crossed the line. I obeyed in blind terror. When one faceless thing thrust an arm over the salt, I slammed a talisman onto its wrist. Instantly its flesh hissed as though splashed with boiling oil. A sickening smell of burning meat filled the air, and it shrieked in a woman's voice so sharp that my ears rang. But another one came after it. Then another. The box shook wildly. The gap in the lid widened. Inside, I caught glimpses of something moving. Not a complete body, but endless coils of black hair twisted around each other. Beneath them flashes of pale skin appearing and vanishing. Once I thought I saw a mouth too wide opening among the hair. Another time I saw many tiny eyes glimmering like fish roe packed into flesh. The thing was not fully climbing out. It was testing the opening, trying to slide through like black water through a crack, patient and eager. Then it spoke in my mother's voice. Nom. I froze. That voice was soft, weak, broken exactly as it had been in my mother's final days. When she no longer had the strength to open her eyes but still held my hand tightly. I could smell the imagined sting of antiseptic. I could hear the heart monitor from that hospital room years ago. The night rain outside the window. I looked up, and tears were already on my face before I realized it. "It's me," the voice whispered. "I'm so cold." The thing inside the box knew. It knew exactly where my heart was thinnest. It did not attack with claws or teeth. It found the rotting doors already inside a person and pressed slowly against them. I collapsed to my knees. Min was still chanting, his voice cracked and hoarse. But he sounded very far away. In front of me, the box no longer seemed terrifying. It seemed like a tiny coffin holding something precious to me. A powerful urge rose up inside me. If I just opened it all the way. If I just looked once. Maybe I would understand everything. Maybe all of this was some mistake. Maybe the dead were truly waiting inside to be set free. I crawled toward the box. Min realized too late. He hurled the bronze bell aside and grabbed my shoulder. Pulling me back, I twisted against him. In that deranged moment, I no longer saw Min as my friend but as someone trying to stop me from reaching something sacred. I shoved him away and snatched up the knife he had placed nearby for cutting replacement seals. Just one cut. Just one. The instant the blade touched the rope, something wrapped its arms around me from behind. It was not Min. Those arms were ice cold, limp, and wet. A muddy, bloody stench filled the air at the back of my neck. I whipped around and found myself face to face with a face that had no face. Smooth, gray, slick, with only a horizontal tear in the middle slowly splitting open like the mouth of a fish. From inside that slit came a whisper of dozens of voices layered together. "Open it." I screamed and stabbed backward. The blade sank into cold, dense flesh that did not feel anything like a living body. The faceless corpse convulsed and slid off me, leaving black slime smeared across my shirt. Min seized the chance, lunged in, and ripped the knife from my hand, driving it straight into the crack of the box lid. Metal punched into something soft deep inside with a wet thud. At once every sound around the shrine exploded into a single monstrous shriek. It no longer borrowed anyone's voice. The sound coming from the box rose high and piercing, then plunged into a low series of growls like hundreds of flayed beasts snarling through one throat. The lid flew open, every candle went out. In the dense dark, I saw only a huge black mass burst upward, dragging with it countless strands of hair or roots or hands. I could not tell which. The air turned glacial, as if something had sucked out all warmth. Min screamed a phrase I did not understand and smashed the bronze bell against the ground. It shattered. A ring of sound burst out. The black mass faltered for the briefest instant, and in that moment, under a flash of lightning tearing across the sky, I saw what was inside the box. Even now, I cannot describe it completely. Because it had no fixed shape to describe. It was like a human body stripped of all limits. Assembled from hair, bone, skin, and limbs stolen from many others. Its upper half resembled the frame of an emaciated woman. But below the chest it opened like a pit full of faces writhing in darkness. Those faces were incomplete, some with only eyes, some only mouths, some half a forehead, all piled on top of one another as though stuffed and alive. Long arms jutted from its back, reaching to the ground, joints bent the wrong way, fingers hooked like meat hooks. Its head was veiled completely by black hair trailing over the mud. But within that hair pale, blind eyes kept opening and shutting, staring in several directions at once. When it moved, it did not move like a living creature but like a mass of liquid forced into form by malicious will. All of its eyes turned toward me, and I understood why it knew my name. A mass of memories long buried in my mind suddenly rose up, fragment by fragment, then fitted together. The times I had run a high fever as a child and heard my parents arguing about the last turn of keeping watch. The look in my father's eyes whenever I asked why we never went back to my grandfather's village. The old genealogy sheet he had burned in the yard on Lunar New Year's Eve. The nightmares I had over and over for years of a wooden lid and knocking from inside. None of it had been random. My bloodline had kept watch over this thing through many generations. One keeper for each generation. Whenever that keeper grew weak, old, or close to death, the box would be passed to the next named one. No one spoke of it because they thought silence would protect the children. But silence had only given it time to wait until the right moment to come on its own. My grandfather had probably died because of it. My father had fled it by severing himself from his hometown, moving elsewhere, burying the past, but he had not been cruel enough to tell me the truth. Or perhaps he had hoped the ritual would end with him. He was wrong, and now, in the rainy night beside the collapsed shrine, that colossal black mass was looking at me like a door already standing open. "It chose you because of blood," Min gasped behind me. He was kneeling, blood running from the corner of his mouth. "If you don't close it now, it'll follow you forever." "How?" I shouted. Min pointed at the notebook, now soaked through with mud. At the final line he had marked in advance. "It needs the keeper's name, and the keeper's blood, on the new seal." I understood at once what that meant. This seal had never been a matter of imprisoning evil without payment. Every generation, one person had to become the closing door. My name on the box was not only an address. It was the lock. To seal it again, I would have to accept becoming the next keeper. That meant living the rest of my life on the edge between sleep and knocking. Between shadow and the thing waiting behind it. Or I could leave it, and it would get out. The black mass moved toward me. Every movement it made caused the mud under the shrine floor to bubble as if boiling. The faceless corpses around it dropped to their knees like dogs before a master. From within the curtain of hair over its head, my mother's voice rose again, gentle enough to tear me open. "Don't do this. My son, open it and come with me." Then my father's voice, low and grave, "You won't endure it." Then my own voice, warped into a mockery, "You were always waiting for this day." I no longer had time left for fear. I snatched up a jagged shard of broken pottery from beside the shrine floor and slashed my palm hard. Blood welled up hot against the dead cold. Min threw me the stack of fresh talismans. I pressed my bleeding hand onto the top charm and used my finger to write my name across it in my own blood. The black mass screamed and lunged. Its long arms slashed through the air, tearing vines, knocking over rotten pillars. I threw myself toward the empty box and grabbed the lid that had been flung aside. It was unbelievably heavy, like lifting a water-soaked tomb slab. Min crawled over to help me as the creature closed the last few steps. "Read it," Min shouted. I did not know what to read, so I began repeating my own name over and over, my voice breaking in the rain and the screaming. Strangely, it worked. The black mass jerked to a halt, its body warping as though being dragged backward. The faces in its chest opened their mouths soundlessly, and the hair on its head lashed like whips. Min seized the last handful of salt and threw it straight at the thing. Wherever the salt struck, white smoke burst up and the smell of burned rot filled the air. I slammed the lid down. The instant the lid hit the edges, the thing in the darkness lunged. One of its arms shot into the narrowing gap, the hand spreading like a spider and clamping around my wrist. Pain shot straight into my skull. It felt as though hundreds of tiny teeth were biting through my skin at once. But I still slapped the blood-soaked talisman onto the center of the lid. Over the old carved name, Min took the knife hilt and hammered it down onto the charm as though nailing it shut. A blast of freezing wind exploded through the shrine. Lightning flashed across the sky. Every faceless corpse around us threw back its head and shrieked, then collapsed into the mud like empty sacks of skin. The hand gripping my wrist convulsed violently, then jerked back inside at the instant before the lid sealed completely. Everything went silent. No more wind, no more rain, no more moaning beneath the banyan roots. Only me and Min sprawled across the freezing stone floor, gasping like men who had just clawed their way out of deep water. The box lay in the middle of the shrine, motionless. The old ropes were nearly all snapped. The old charms burned black. But on the lid, my new blood talisman clung to the wood as though something inside were pressing it into place. I thought it was over. That was the most foolish thought I had that night. When we carried the box back to the truck, dawn was close. Min was exhausted and had to lean on me to walk. My wrist, where it had touched me, had already darkened in a black ring, and the veins beneath the skin stood out like threads of decay. We said very little on the drive back. The silence now was not relief. It was the silence of two people who had looked into an abyss and knew it had not closed. At the apartment building parking lot, Min caught my arm. "Don't bring it back upstairs." "Then where do I put it?" "I don't know yet. I have to find another place. But at least tonight." He stopped and looked at my blackening wrist. "You need to stay somewhere with other people." I was about to agree, but when I turned to look into the truck bed one last time, I saw something new on the lid beside the blood talisman. A line of writing. Not carved, not painted in ink. It seemed to be slowly seeping outward from inside the wood in damp black strokes. To open once is to see once. I had not even had time to call Min before the parking lot lights went out. In that short darkness, I heard the knocking. Knock. Not from inside the box. From behind my left eye. I went rigid, then it came again. Knock. Knock. It was inside my head, as though someone were lightly tapping on the inner wall of my skull with a knuckle. Testing how hollow it was, I collapsed, clutching my head in both hands. Min turned, caught me, asked in panic what was wrong, but I could not answer. In that instant, images flashed before my eyes that were not mine. A low dark room reeking of incense, ash and blood. An old man kneeling before the same box, carving a name into the lid with a knife while weeping. When he looked up in the firelight, I recognized him. It was my grandfather. Then the image vanished. The parking lot lights came back on. I was gasping, my face wet with tears before I even realized it. And I understood. The thing sealed in the box had not escaped. But it had left behind a very small part of itself inside me when it touched my wrist. Not enough to take form. Not enough to break the seal. But enough for it to see through my eyes. Hear through my ears. And knock from within whenever it wanted to remind me that it was still there. Min did not know that. Or perhaps he guessed and did not dare say it. We moved the box temporarily to an abandoned storage shed owned by someone he knew on the outskirts. Locked it behind 3 iron doors. And covered the place in charms. From that day on, my life looked normal on the surface again. I still went to work. I still ate. I still spoke normally to my coworkers. But every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., the knocking began inside my head. Some nights only 3 knocks. Some nights it lasted for hours. Some nights I looked in the mirror at midnight and my left eye's reflection lagged a fraction behind my right. As though another person stood behind the pupil. Some days while washing my hands, I looked down and the water in the sink turned murky black for exactly 1 second. Then clear again. Sometimes my phone switched itself on and opened the photograph of the box even after I had deleted it. In the picture, the blood talisman still clung to the lid, but the words beside it had changed. I have seen your house. I moved. It did not help. I took leave from work and went to see my father. He looked at the dark ring around my wrist for a long time. Then turned his face away. That night, when I pressed him for answers, he sat on the porch in the dark for hours, smoking one cigarette after another. Near dawn, he finally said, "I should have told you a long time ago." And then he told me about my grandfather, about the unnatural deaths in our family, about the old shrine, about how our bloodline had kept watch over something of unknown origin after it was unearthed from an ancient grave exposed by a landslide. The first man to open the box had been my great-great-grandfather. The second had gone mad. The third hanged himself beneath the banyan tree. After that, they learned to seal it with talismans, blood, and the name of the next living keeper. My father had once been chosen. But after my grandfather died he fled the village. He had thought leaving meant escape. But no one truly escapes. They only pass the turn. By the time he finished, I no longer had the strength to be angry. I only felt a cold, exhausted emptiness settling into my bones. The people in my family had taken turns living beside that knocking for generations. A reminder that there are mistakes once dug out of the earth that descendants can only seal shut again. Never erase. 3 months later, Min disappeared. He vanished on the way to the storage place, where he was supposed to check the seals with me. His motorbike was found toppled by the roadside. The key still in it. His phone still in the compartment. But Min himself was gone. The police searched for 2 days and found nothing except a few black muddy streaks dragging away into a patch of wild grass. I knew exactly what that meant. I went to the storage place alone. All 3 iron doors were still locked. The charms were still in place. But inside, the box had turned itself around so that its lid faced the door. And on that lid another line had appeared. Alone now. I did not scream. I did not smash anything. I did not faint. I just stood in front of the box for a long time. feeling something inside me wear down so completely that there was no room left for panic. I understood its game. It did not need to get fully outside in order to kill. It only needed to touch someone through a crack. A dream, a voice in the night, a shadow on the porch. It was patient, like mold spreading in the corner of a wall. All it needed was enough time. Since then, I have been the only one left keeping it. I have moved the box from place to place. Basement, warehouse, an abandoned house by the river. In every place I paste charms, scatter salt, hang bells, and copy down the instructions men left behind. I do not dare marry. I do not dare have children. I do not dare keep anyone too close to me for too long. I know now that blood is a road, memory is a door, and love is the easiest lock to break. I live like a gravekeeper for something that is not dead. Listening every day to the silence and knowing that silence is not safety. Only the time when it is thinking of another way. Now, as I write these lines, it is raining outside the window again. The clock on the table is approaching 2:13 a.m. The box is in the basement, behind 3 iron doors, wrapped in the newest blood seal I made myself. But I can still hear the knocking. Knock. Very faint. Not from the basement. From inside the wall. Knock, knock. Near the head of my bed. It is learning how to pass through things that no longer need to be opened. Or perhaps it could always do that. And before now it only wanted me to believe I still had control. The dark stain on my wrist has spread nearly to my elbow. Sometimes when I doze, I dream I am standing before my old apartment door and the box is there. Dry and new, with someone else's name burned into the lid. Sometimes it is the name of a child I have never met. Sometimes it is the name of whoever is reading these words. Sometimes it is yours. If you are reading this now, perhaps there is still time. Perhaps there is not. I know only one thing for certain. More certain than anything I have ever known in my life. There are boxes that are not made to be opened. There are seals that are not meant to be challenged. And there are knockings, no matter how soft, that must never be answered. If one rainy night you come home and find an old wooden box at your door, wrapped in black rope, pasted with yellow charms, with your name carved into the lid in scorched letters, then do not be curious. Do not be compassionate. Do not think you are calm enough to control what comes after. Do not place your hand on the lid. Do not listen to the voice inside. Do not believe anyone begging for help in the voice of the person you love most. And if you have already brought it inside, if you have already heard it knock, if you have already let it know what you fear most, then remember this sentence before it is too late. Never open the sealed wooden box. Because the most terrifying thing was never the possibility that it might get out. It was the fact that once it has seen you, a part of it will always remain inside, knocking and knocking and knocking, until the day you yourself open the final door.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.